Welcome to another episode of the Career Keynotes podcast with Tincup and Gardiner, where William and Andrew chop it up with respected Silicon Valley talent acquisition and HR leaders to get the real story behind their career journeys, along with an insider's view of how companies engage with candidates. Let's face it, these days, finding the job, much less nailing down an interview, is not easy. This is a rare opportunity to learn firsthand what companies are looking for in a candidate and the best ways to engage with them. And now, here are William and Andrew.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's good to see you. Another killer episode of Career Keynotes. You know producer Bev, you know William. I'm very excited about, I think I say that every time, but it's true. And it's never been more true than today, because I've known today's guest for, gosh, I think I could even say decades, without exaggerating. So without further ado, I would like to welcome you, Gary Albright, to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Thank you, and you're welcome. It's an honor and a privilege, because as we were talking before we started recording, the purpose of the show is to make an impact and to add value and to kind of pull back the veil of talent acquisition and what is that all about, and how do companies engage with candidates, and then additionally, hey, how it's not always being I got a thing on here saying we're recording. I get that. Okay. How did you become Gary Albright? And you've got, as you know, talk in hyperbole, so rather than me tell everybody how amazing and smart and successful you are, if you wouldn't mind just taking a couple of minutes and giving some context to the audience, who Gary Albright is.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. And, there's kind of a simple answer. The way I became Gary Albright was by accident of birth. And my mom named me Gary. It's kind of
that's where we start.
I thought you were going to say it was a cold and windy day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, it's sperm. Yeah. Oh yeah. All right. Too far back. Gotcha. We'll fast forward.
Yeah, actually, it was a cold and windy day. I was born in the Army Barracks Hospital in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, on a wintry day in February, which was the most famous national holiday in February, which I'm sure you all know is
the 29th, leap
Valentine's
year?
Day?
Groundhog's Day.
Arbor Day. Oh, Groundhog's Day.
Groundhog Day, nice. Okay. Fumble!
Yeah.
There's nothing in February.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so all right, then that is not insignificant. I don't mean to marginalize that at all. But when I met you, and I'm dating myself.
Both of us.
God was a kid. No, when I met you, you were leading a talent acquisition. Maybe were they even calling it talent acquisition then, Gary?
Who knows?
He was recruiting.
Personnel.
No, it wasn't personnel. Thank God. But no, you were leading the talent acquisition organization infrastructure for a very big company, and it was a lot of responsibility and work. So anyways, if you could just give the audience some context into who you are and how you got to be where you are, that would be very helpful.
Yeah. So I'll try to do this in a succinct form. I've worked so many places. I'm still trying to find a place that'll keep me. But when I was in college, I studied political science, right? I had an undergraduate degree and actually graduated a quarter early. So I had 6 months before I started graduate school, and I knew I had a teaching assistantship coming up in graduate school. So I decided to use that 6 months to make as much money as I could. And so I looked in the want ads in the newspaper, because that's how you found a job, and got the highest paid job I could, which was as an iron worker. And I worked as an iron worker for 6 months. Great experience. Learned a lot about hard work and dedication and that sort of stuff. And then started in graduate school. And I thought I wanted to be a teacher, right? But I found that the experience through my teaching assistantship was not really giving me the intrinsic rewards that I was looking for. So when I graduated, I started looking around for a job, right? And I also started to try to figure out how to interview or how to take an interview, right? And it was very daunting and totally overwhelming. It was like, you read all these books and they say, well, when the interviewer asks you this, then you say that. And, I just couldn't take all that in and use it. So, I'll give myself a little credit for a little bit of thinking out of the box. I switched my focus as opposed to studying how to take an interview. I read a book on how to conduct an interview. And so I kind of took the perspective of what might that person on that side of the desk want to know about me, right? And it worked out well. I got a job. I went into an executive training program with a retail chain of stores based in Miami, Florida, in their executive training program. Within the first 6 months I was there, the person who was their college recruiter, who had first interviewed me, decided he wanted to go back into the mainstream of the business. And the vice president of human resources happened to be sitting next to me on a flight from Orlando to Miami, struck up a conversation, asked me about my graduate program, told him my major was American federal government, and one of my master's papers was on the history and development of the civil rights movement from a constitutional law perspective. You got to have a long title. But that was the underpinning of a lot of the civil rights legislation. And he said, well, you thought about being the college recruiter. And that's how it all started.
Gary, that's a great answer.
That is a
How did
fantastic
you
answer.
stay muted? Producer Bev started Nordstrom's. It's a little known fact.
I love it when you guys come in and say, well, I started in retail. Doesn't matter where on the retail wheel, everyone should start in retail.
100%.
So
Retail is detail.
retail is detail.
My dad,
Bev, when you talk about being from someplace, that's one of the things that I say about, people ask me, well, why did you stay in talent acquisition? I said, well, there's one of two answers to that. Either I had some passion about it, or I was never smart enough to get away from it. So
listen, one thing about you, audience, Gary is a giver of self, a big giver of self, and don't take my word for it. Reach out to him on LinkedIn. Gary Albright, you see his name right there. No, but seriously, you are, Gary. It's because you care, and it sounds cliche, but anyways, we're interviewing you, but the retail thing is not insignificant. I thought you were when I went to college, I wanted to make a bunch of money. I was dealing marijuana. That was my secret, if we're being fully transparent. I was the most popular kid in Whitney Hall at Chico State for about 7 months, and I didn't have a scale.
Well, Andrew,
that's why you were popular.
Exactly. I was like, that looks like
it wasn't a profitable business, by the way. Just FYI.
Very light thumb on the scale. Well, Andrew, that my selflessness is not entirely lacking in self-serving. I've always felt two things. Number one is that I'm not comfortable taking the credit on the things that my teams have accomplished. Most of what I've accomplished, and I have a good sense of myself, and I know what I've done, but most of what I've accomplished has been through the work of others, right? So that's number one. Number two, I intentionally prioritize helping my friends and helping other people because I believe things come back to you in a nonlinear way. So if you do the right thing, it's going to come back to you in some form or fashion. I'd like to think that some of the searches that we've gotten since I've been in the search practice have become as a result of the goodwill that I've built up over time. But you never do that stuff with any sort of expectation of return. You just put it out there, and
most people make the mistake that they think it's tit for tat, and it's really karma. You're a good person, and good things happen to you. Gary, what I'd like to ask you is, as you look at your career to date, what is the petri dish, if you will, but what sets you up to thrive? Like, what do you need around you that recreates an environment where you can thrive?
Yeah. It's got to be an environment, number one, at the highest level, where the work that we do is going to make a difference and is going to be valued, right? Maintenance environments, transactional environments, environments where we are order takers is not the place for me. I am a builder. I want an environment where you give me an objective, you give me the resources and the time to accomplish that objective, and you trust that I'm going to do the right thing. I've had two notable experiences that validated that for me. And also, when you go into something like that for the first time, you're not sure if you're going to be able to do it. But at Cadence Design Systems, which is where Andrew and I first met, they were starting up a new business, Spectrum Services, as opposed to just offering their chip design tools to the customers. They were now offering up a spectrum of consulting services, from simply at one end, here's the tool, use it, good luck, over to the other side of, they would actually take customers' designs, design the chip, turn it back over, ready to go to the fab. But to staff that organization required a new type of skill set that they had heretofore not had. And Cadence was a fairly small company. There were about 400 people in the company at that time. Over the first 18 months I was there, we hired 1,000 people and grew that business, Spectrum, which fueled Cadence's performance to be one of the best performing stocks in that part of the 1990s. So that was kind of, my first stamp of, yeah, you can do this, and hypergrowth may be your thing. And then, the last corporate experience I had was kind of the cherry on the cake. In August of 2010, I joined Lab 126, which was an Amazon division. They made one product, the Kindle, the third generation Kindle. There were 244 people in the company. And Amazon in total had 20,000 employees worldwide, 20,000. Today they have over 1 million. The stock was trading at $117 a share. 6 years later, I left on April Fool's Day in 2016, which was a good day for me to end my corporate career. And we had grown to net 3,500 people, all of those in technical roles, no sales, no marketing. This was hardware design, software design, supply chain positions, very difficult positions to fill. And, and we had gone from one product to over 35 products in the market. At the end there, I had the recruiting teams over the time I was there for the Fire TV, for the phone, which failed, but hey, we learned a lot from our failures. For the Echo and Alexa family of devices, for the Fire TV. It was a freaking blast. And basically it was a greenfield opportunity. I was given the objective to build a staffing organization, everything from systems to employee referral programs. I had the company website, not just the jobs website, but the company website. When you're in a startup, which that was, you wear a number of different hats. At the time I left, the stock wasn't trading what it is today, but today I think it's about $3,300 a share. So
who's counting?
It was great.
Listen, that's amazing. And you've just established yourself as a very credible, if not experienced TA practitioner. I want to go back to something you said earlier about, because as you know, part of it is, hey, I want to be successful in TA, and you've been successful, and you mentioned the team. I think that's important, having a good team. I've asked a number of TA leaders, and they all say just get a good team. A good team is super important because you can't do it by yourself. So, but as you look back over the trajectory of your career, which has got some really, impressive highlights, what are some of the key? You talked about what you should do, or you got lucky. I think you make your own luck, right? That producer Bev always says the harder she tries, the luckier she gets. I like that narrative. But what are some attributes that you think made you very successful as a TA leader, and maybe some that didn't serve you well? In other words, I love William's question. If you could go back and talk to younger Gary right after, on that plane ride. But anyways, you get the gist of the question.
Yeah, well, certainly, and I think this is true for everybody, but the guy I was at the start of my career is not the guy I was at the end of my career. And if I did one thing well, it was to be curious, to learn from others, to incorporate the best of what worked for other people. As I look at somebody, I say, oh, gee, they did that really well. And I can incorporate that with authenticity into who I am. Yet, similarly, when you see somebody who does something that is ineffective or dysfunctional, you can leave that with them, but learn the same lesson. So that's one thing that I think that I did. The other thing is that I hope that I was very transparent in my communications with people. Life's too short to try to construct fairy tales and who was it that said, always tell the truth and you never have to remember anything, right?
Producer Bev.
So producer Bev. So, and I've learned not to define my value to anything in terms of the approval that I receive from others, but to be true to myself and to speak the truth and to let the chips fall where they may. So I think those are some of the things that I've learned, and I think those are things that, as you go to positions of increasing responsibility, become all the more important that you demonstrate that whatever you want to call it, openness, fearlessness, directness, transparency, all those things, got to do them.
So you've worked with, at this point, let's just say hundreds, maybe even thousands of hiring managers through your career. What's your bit with working with hiring managers? Like what's made you successful? And again, everyone's kind of got a different strategy on working with hiring managers. So really what I'd like to know, and I think what the audience would like to know, is what's made you successful there with them?
Yeah, well, I think it follows on to what we just talked about of establishing your credibility. And I think the way you do that is in delivering results. It's not unusual, and maybe even in some instances that it's typical, that the hiring manager believes they know more about what you do than what it is that you do. Very few of the recruiters that I've hired have education or direct experience in engineering, yet most of the hiring managers that I've worked with, at least at one point in time, have hired one person in their career, which makes them an expert on all things recruiting. So, you run into that quite frequently. And the way you establish yourself is through delivering results to the business. And that's been my focus. People talk to me about, well, what's it like to work for you? And I always go back to that 38 Special song, hold on loosely, but don't let go. Right. I try to hire people who have good professional skills and give them the resources to do their job and get out of their way. Now, some people say, well, you must be an easy person to work for. And actually I'm not, because I am focused on results, and it's very easy for me to separate the issues between how I feel about you as a person and how you're performing in your job. Right. And you're back to what you said. If I learned one technique, if you will, William, that I've applied consistently, it's the ability to be direct and to deliver any kind of news immediately and directly. And there's a magic little phrase that I use that totally enables you to say anything to anybody.
Well, hold on, we might want to timestamp this. Everybody lean in. Okay,
everybody lean in.
And that is, William, I have too much respect for you not to tell you this.
Oh, love that.
After that, I can tell you that you just made such an egregious error that we're going to fire your butt this afternoon, or anything in between. But it goes to always respecting the integrity of the individual.
Okay, so listen,
Say, you guys say that again. Guys say that. No, Andrew, say that again. It's just the phrase itself. I have too much respect for you not to tell you the truth.
Whatever it is, insert.
Yeah,
Did
I
I
have too
get
much
that from
respect
you,
for you
Gary?
not to tell you this.
Not to tell you this. I
And
love that. Oh my God. I might get that
I
as a tattoo.
I must have gotten that from you, and you could also say, and for myself.
Yeah.
I mean, but I just said that on a call, and it's a good um
Love that.
it's a good, and I love that. Those are the little nuggets of gold that I think that come out when you're having a conversation with, and I don't want to pull a muscle patting ourselves on the back here, but three pretty bright, experienced people that have spent appreciable time in the employment market. Okay, but so let's get back on track. So Gary, you said something earlier, and we'll stay on the tracks of talent acquisition. You said transparency. You said, I mean, kind of implied it, being true to your word. Being honest. Obviously, those are really core competencies that I think. And I guess what I was going to say is those sentiments, or those tropes, if you will, would serve you well in any endeavor. Are there what in your mind are some of the less obvious attributes of a TA leader that you probably wouldn't notice or wouldn't capture unless you were actually in it?
Well, you can feel at times a bit isolated. And by that, I mean that, kind of back to what I was saying about the hiring managers being presumptive to know a lot about your profession. The TA function, I've always felt, ideally should report into the head of sales in a corporation, because the process is a sales process, right? Prospecting, qualifying candidates, selling, closing, right? But it's not. It's in the realm of human resources, and frequently, the senior HR person in an organization will never have spent a minute in a recruiter's chair sourcing candidates or filling requisitions. And from the outside looking in, staffing looks like a fairly straightforward, easy task, right? And in fact, as with anything else, the more difficult something is, people who perform it at the highest level make it appear easy, right? The analogy I like to use is, imagine the aliens land outside the Oakland Coliseum when the Warriors are playing, and somehow they get tickets and they go in and they look down and they see these guys bouncing this ball down the floor, and they jump up in the air and they spin around and they slam it down. The one alien turns to the other one and say, "That looks fun. Let's go do that." Right? So, and then the challenge gets complicated by the partnership with HR business partners. There are some HR business partners who see their partnership being with the business and not with all the component areas of HR, TA being one of those. So when an issue comes up within a client organization, practitioners of those types are like, "Tell you what, Mr. Hiring Manager, I got it. I'll go fix those people in staffing." Okay, no, that's the wrong response. "Tell you what, Mr. Hiring Manager, I'm sure the people in staffing have a point of view on this. Let's include them in the conversation." Ding. That's the right answer. But that's why I say it can be it can feel a little isolating, is that at times you feel like nobody understands you.
It's a really good point, and I think that again could apply to a lot of things. I liked your narrative around, the good people make it look easy, and listen, it's not easy. I think, and there's a perception that, oh, you know what, that guy, and I used to think that. I used to think, oh man, be the head of TA, you're making all the hiring decisions, you control all this stuff, control power. And it's not. It's just it's a never. It's a it's what you just said. It's very difficult. You're never done. And when you are, you're not. And and then, oh, by the way, the hiring's just part of it. Then there's the whole letting people go. That's not a fun part of it, but we're going to stay positive. Okay, William, we're not going to pivot quite yet to the candidate side. William has a question, and producer Bev, I'd
Sup-
love to hear from you after William.
Super tactical. Just because you mentioned employee referrals,
Mhm.
I'd like to ask you your favorite or even your most successful program for employee referrals. Like, what was that bit?
Well, yeah. So let me give a shout out to Andrew here.
Gee, I was just going to say that sounds canned. I know, right,
No, no,
William?
no.
That's a
No,
nice
no, no,
setup.
no. I want to make this point because actually I use this as an example of in my interview with Amazon. They said, give us an example of an innovative idea that you have here that you could bring to the party. And I said, well, what I think you should do with your employee referral award program is purchase a ticket for two on Virgin Galactic, and there's planned spaceship to launch civilians into outer space, and auction that off on an annual basis to the people that have made the most employee referrals, and have a secondary policy underwritten by Sotheby's of London or some specialty in Lloyd's of London, some specialty insurer. In the event that the people don't actually take it, then you give them $25,000 or whatever. And the person that gave me that idea is Andrew Gardiner. Kudos to Andrew. But one of the innovative things that we did and again, it was at Lab 126, was implemented an accelerated scale of payments for the employee referral program. So it was $3,000 for your first referral. And with that referral, a 1-year stopwatch started. And then for every subsequent referral you made within that 1-year period of time, an additional $1,500 increment was added to your second referral, up to $7,500. Once you hit that mark, then you stayed at $7,500 until you hit that 1-year mark, and then you started over again. And we had some people who did real well by that.
Love that.
Genius.
Thank you.
That wasn't all my idea. It was a collaborative thing, but we did some good stuff there back at Cadence. Remember, we'd parked the Harley Davidson or a cigarette boat, and I love just the concept, and that was really your idea. And that was, we all know. I mean, maybe we don't, but audience, what the interesting thing about an ERP, and there's a lot of studies that support this, is you think, oh, it's the $3,500 or the $7,500. Well, no, it's not. It might be the lottery ticket that you get, or it's just the notoriety. It's not how well known is it? Most companies have an ERP or employee referral program, and they're not super clear on the rules but if I get a Starbucks coffee thing for just sending someone's name in, or it's a trip to the, outer space, that's going to put it on the map. People are going to know about it and want to participate, and that's what it's about. Okay, so now we are going to pivot. And you said something at the outset of the podcast that was very interesting to me. And you said I'm using my words, but please correct me if I'm wrong, but you were not super confident or clear on your interviewing ability. So what you decided to do was get a book on how to interview, and that kind of, in essence, gave you an inside track on how to interview better, which is genius. I mean, and I think that not just the actual act of doing that and the results speak for themselves, but the thinking behind that of contrarian or being different, standing out. How do I, I'm a big reader these days. Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way. How do I, because stuff's going to be hard, right? Advocating for yourself, especially in a job market like today, is not easy. And they don't teach, I mean, poli-sci, I love that. They don't teach, hey, and then we always joke around on the show, Gary, being good at getting a job isn't something you want to be good at. You want to be good at at working, or being good at dating. It's not something you want to be good at. You just want to be married. So what are some action, and William's just pinged me, so we'll, after this, William can dip in his oar, but what are some things that come to mind to you? And I want to just put this out there. We've done a number of these shows. So we've kind of covered networking. We've covered, have a firm grip. We've covered look the person in the eye. A lot of and I'm not looking for the Hail Mary, Gary, but I think one of the things I've always enjoyed and respected about you is the commonsensical kind of blocking and tackling, cross the T's, dot the I's. But what are some kind of creative? You've interviewed thousands of people. You've hired thousands of people. You've not hired thousands of people. What are some things that come to mind for you that the audience, if someone's new to the job market, and this is, COVID obviously has had a big impact. But what are some things that come to mind to you that you think would be along the lines of the reading a book on interviewing, which is not a bad idea, listeners?
Yeah. So first of all, you as you started to talk there, we're talking about, you don't want to be good about, interviewing, you want to be good about working. But that brings to mind something that this gentleman, Bob Leach, who headed the Spectrum Services division at Cadence, once said about Silicon Valley. There used to be a time in Silicon Valley where companies like HP, with the HP way, and IBM, there was this implied covenant of continued employment, almost a paternalistic attitude taken, that as long as you do a good job, you're going to have a job. Well, as Silicon Valley started to go through the many cycles that it's gone through, people, the most expensive commodity in any company, got jettisoned quickly. And so that whole covenant was broken. So now the attitude is, I work for Silicon Valley, Inc. This is Bob's quote. I work for Silicon Valley, Inc. I just happen to be employed by, fill in the name of your current company here. So the point to job seekers is that when you feel like, you've had a number of short stints, that isn't by itself a negative thing in your background, right? But here's the thing I think that I tell people to do or think about on their resume, and I think it's something that they need to incorporate into understanding their experiences and how to relate that. And that is to answer a very simple question. And that question is, so what? I read a resume, and once you've got it down to the final set of candidates, they all read fairly similarly. Candidates have done the similar things, have similar amounts of experiences, but they don't talk about what resulted from that. What was the impact of what you did on that project? How did that help the business? What did you learn from that? So what, right? And so it's the same thing about, interviewing. So what are you going to do to make yourself valuable to this company, right? And it's not, I don't think it's a new story. I don't think it's a new technique, but the more you can know about that company, then the better you're going to be able to answer the likely questions they ask, and the better you're going to be able to relate your background into how you make a difference. And the more you're going to be able to impress whoever it is that you're interviewing with about your preparation, which reflects how serious you are about your candidacy. So I don't know, to answer your question.
Absolutely.
Yes, you did. And I'm going to let William go, but I'm going to come back to you and you're right. I mean, even if you just approach it, so what, in the subject line, that would be, contrarian, you want to stand out. And that's supposing you got the interview. I'm going to come back to you and ask you, okay, well, what's your secret on getting the interview? That would be good. But William, go ahead.
Sure. I want to ask you your worst personal experience, your worst personal interview experience, no names, and it can be either as a candidate or a candidate, doesn't matter. So as a hiring person or as a candidate yourself, but the worst experience. I want to, and again, we're not trying to make fun of anybody or out anybody or any of that type of stuff. So no names or anything like that, but just your worst experience?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've got a good story here. Uh, so when I was the college recruiter for Jordan Marsh in Miami, I would go out and I would do the first interviews on campus with the slate of candidates, and then we would select those to come down to Miami for further interviews. So at Florida State University, they had a program in fashion design and merchandising, which was a major. And unsurprisingly, a lot of, I think everyone I ever interviewed out of that program was a woman, young ladies. And I knew the professor, and I would meet with him, have dinner with him the night before. He'd kind of give me the lowdown on, who I was going to interview and what he thought of them. And so this is 1977, right, or thereabouts. And at this interview, in walks young Diane. I'll never forget the last name. Every aspect of this experience, William, is crystallized in my memory forever. Young Diane, and she sits down, and again, it's a fashion merchandising program. And so all of the young ladies show up very fashionably attired. And so I'm making small talk, right? And I said, oh, Miss, I see you have a double pierced ear. That's a very fashion forward trend, and it looks very nice. And she looked at me and she said, that's a mole. I'm having it removed tomorrow. I was like, would you like my job?
Mortified.
You can sit right here and I'll go.
I could see that going a couple different ways. That was a mistake. It's a birth defect.
Oh God.
But a mole. That's genius. Oh,
So ever since, man,
yes.
I play it straight up,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'll be like you were, William. Yeah, well, it's raining outside today. So now let's talk about
Not sequitur.
Okay, listen, I got good news, people. Producer Bev has a question, so we're all on pins and needles here. Go ahead.
Oh, come
Producer
on.
Bev.
All right. So, do you enjoy doing Zoom interviews, like not in-person interviews?
Great question.
Or you had a big bite of not in-person interviews because of the separation we've all gone through. Do you like better in person, or do you like the computer flavored interviews?
So here's what I think about either in-person interviews or Zoom interviews. And this is going to be one moment where I'm going to kind of walk us out on a little circuit here, if you can bear with me. So what's the hot topic in HR and TA these days? D&I, right? Diversity and inclusion. And every company has now focused on diversity and inclusion. And I would say appropriately so, with the events over the last year, Black Lives Matters and George Floyd's tragedy. And a lot of companies have set up programs and managers of their D&I initiatives. And I think that's in the right direction, but I don't think we're doing enough of the right thing. So when I zoom back, no pun intended, from this and interrogate the reality of where we are, I really have to wonder if what we've been doing is correct, because the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964. Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968. Title IX came in 1972. The Universal Guideline for Employee Selection Procedures came in 1978. And so what we've taught ourselves is you can't legislate this type of change. It has to occur organically, right? And so I would hope that these D&I initiatives focus on things that enable better understanding at an organic level, right? So I'm concerned that these programs become, let's check the box. Okay, we're doing something about D&I, and we happily go our merry way. Well, the follow-on question I asked to people is that when they say we've got a program, is do you still do in-person interviews? And they're like, well, of course. Well, as soon as you see my image, the sum total of your experience, whether it's in person or over Zoom, the sum total of your acculturated learnings and experience start to come into play. Well, he's kind of an old guy, my friend Jimmy, he looks to be about as old as that guy. And Jimmy can't make it till noon until having a nap. And he's kind of got a cloudy look in his eyes. Cousin Merle looks that way, and Cousin Merle's dumb as a bag of rocks. So we can't help ourselves in that way. And so I'm real excited that I've been involved with this startup that I think I mentioned earlier, because what it's focused on is helping people and companies understand the cultural, social, and behavioral aspects of their employees. Because I believe in doing that, then you have an opportunity to better understand somebody. And once you understand somebody, then you can trust them. And once you can trust them, then you can accept them. Once you can accept them, you might actually enjoy them and find them likable. And out of that, you might actually develop a preference for them. So, on the other wall of otherness, however that other status is, whether it's a person's skin color, disability status, anything else about them, to the extent that we can break that down to beginning to better understand, I think that's a good thing. So how's that for
That's a very noble and
long answer to a short question?
To a great question. So, but listen, you're a very bright guy, and a very passionate guy, and I think that's important. Right back to the, cold and windy day. But listen, let's bring it back to, I'm struggling. I'm on my laptop. I'm applying to jobs. No one's getting back to me. What am I doing wrong, Gary? I mean, I'm smart. I went to college. I'm engaged. I want to add value. No one's given me a chance. Maybe I'm a veteran. Maybe what are some, and I'm not looking for a Hail Mary as much as just, I loved your, so what? Because that's important, I think. But what is some kind of secret sauce? What's something like, because we're coming up on time here, and by the way, we're going to ask you. Well, William already asked you the horrible interview question, so I guess we don't have to do that. We usually close with that. But what are some really, let's say, okay, Gary, you've got, you can only leave the audience with, and again, we've only got about 2 or 3 million subscribers, so it's not like we're boiling the ocean here. But what if you could only leave somebody with 2 or 3 sentiments, thoughts, takeaways?
These are candidates, right?
Yeah, candidates. Words of wisdom. What would you say?
Yeah. So, in everything that you said as to the source of the frustration, you're making all these applications, you're getting all these rejections. What am I doing wrong? Well, you're not doing anything wrong. You're not trying to find 400 jobs. You're trying to find one job, right? And so persistence, I think, is the key. That's number one. Number two is to work through your network and through your friends' networks. I think there's a hesitancy on the part of all of us to ask somebody that we barely know to do something on our behalf. And yet you'll find that people are very gracious and willing to help. It doesn't mean everybody's going to be willing to help, but you just need to be pleasantly surprised about those people who do help. And ultimately that will pay off. To, know your skills, be able to articulate them into how you're going to make a difference. I'm reminded there was a Roman philosopher and statesman, Seneca, and he said, luck is what occurs when opportunity meets preparation. So you never know when you're going to come to that intersection of opportunity, but you can continue to prepare yourself. So, you got to be diligent. You got to keep at it. You're not looking for, you don't care about the 1,000 no's you're getting. You're just looking for the one yes.
William has something, but I just want to respond. You just nailed it. It's not you. It's not you. And to your point, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That's producer Bev. No, it wasn't. It was
Steph Curry.
No, it was Wayne Gretzky. But still, that's so important because it is. I'm not much, right? But I'm all I think about, and it's hard when I'm in my little thing, sending all these things, and I go, "Oh gosh, Andrew, we'd love to have you, but you're just not a significant match for what we have. But we're going to keep your stuff on file for 6 months." And I agree with you. I think it's that persistence. I think once you break through, and that's what I love about the show is, and you touched on something else that's very important. I That's the reason we're doing the show, is to help people, to help break through that. Hey, we want you to win. It's just on the other side of, like Seneca said, it's just on the other side of you're one phone call, one email, one whatever text message away from nirvana. And you just never know when it's going to come in. Oh, producer Bev, did you just unmute? What's going on?
Well, I'm just going to take cuts in front of William real quick while you're talking about networking. In my mind, networking is this big thing of guys in suits and and shaking hands and all this backslapping.
Jeez.
And it's not. It's an email. It's let's go have a Coke. I mean, it can be very small and very simple and not scary at all. But sometimes a word or a philosophy can be so intimidating that you don't realize it's nothing. It's this big and it's simple to do.
Well, and
So
the other
that's
thing
about
Gary said,
networking.
thank you, producer Bev, and you did take cuts. Um, I love that word, by the way. I'm rubber, you're glue. You should do that little one you laid on me the other day, which I'd never heard, some playground humor. But Gary, you said something very profound, and that is people want to help. You got to give it away if you want to keep it. And we all, oh no, Gary's too busy. I know Gary's so important he can. Or Andrew, Andrew must get. No, I want to help. I really do. That's why we're doing the show. So listeners, audience, all 12 billion of you. You gotta ask. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. Yeah, sometimes it gets replaced, but you know what? If you have what's the expression? It's not nothing ventured, nothing gained, but I mean, oh, I know what it is. So, hey, I could keep showing up and keep sending my stuff in, and nothing may happen. If I do nothing, nothing will happen. So be assured of that. But something may happen if I keep showing up. So don't not show up. Okay, William.
And plus
you're on.
let Andrew or Gary decide if they're too busy for you. Don't
Yeah.
assume they're too busy. Let them
Yeah.
decide.
Wow.
Well, and
Timestamp.
the other thing I'd add to that is that it's a nonlinear process, right? So get yourself out there to events. You don't know who you'll meet. You don't know what will come from that. And you don't know, what may happen if you just put yourself out there. So don't stay in your room and rely on Zoom.
Yeah.
100%.
And
So last question for me is, through your career and even up until today, yesterday, what's the best question a candidate has asked you?
that's a good question.
What is the best question the candidate has asked me? I don't know that I've got a good answer for that.
Were you ever stumped by a candidate?
Well, yeah, frequently. And
Or Gary, do your knockout. Do you have a knockout question? What's your favorite
well,
superhero?
they ask me if they ask me something I don't know. I say, I don't know.
Don't know.
I mean, that's not like there. Do I have a what?
A knockout question. I like William uses the word bit. You're a very skilled interviewer, and you're very observant. You pay close attention. Do you have, when you're interviewing somebody or sussing out potential interviews, is there something that you're looking for? Are you screening in? Are you screening out? What's your strategy?
The only thing that I'm very attentive to is examples that that demonstrate what you did to produce a result. And it's a little subtle twist. Everybody wants to be perceived as somebody who works well in a team. But when I hear somebody in an interview talking about we did this and we did that and we did, the other thing, That's great that you performed as part of the team, but what did you do as part of that team that enabled that team's overall success? So I like to hear very specific examples when somebody says, beyond, well, I was responsible for this or that. Okay, well, so what? And what was accomplished? So it's as, kind of simple as that.
What was the impact? I think it goes back to so what?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, listen, I think we tap out there. We usually do this bit about, your most awkward, and it doesn't need to be racy or irreverent. You kind of did, you did it with the piercing mole story. So we touched that base. I think we're good. So Gary, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you outside the confines of the show?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn. That's pretty obvious. For our search practice, my email is gary@kerryevansinc.com. That's KERRIEVANS Inc.com. And my personal consulting business is simply Big Kahuna Consulting LLC@gmail.com.
Beautiful. Gary, I want to thank you for making time. Audience, you don't know this, but it's a Friday before a holiday weekend. Lord knows when this show will drop. But Gary, I really appreciate you taking the time out to do this. And William, producer Bev, always good to see you guys. And then producer Bev, if you could do the audience comments, suggestions, feedback. Always interested in upping our game. I've gotten a lot of feedback from my mom and a few family members that I look washed out and I need a new camera. So this is not a money making endeavor. So I will invest in a camera and a microphone, but if I look washed out, it's the camera, it's not me. And thank you, everybody. Everybody have a good weekend. Like and subscribe.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this episode of Career Keynotes. For more killer content, please like and subscribe to our channel. We welcome all comments and questions and are grateful for any input regarding future content, topics, and guests. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.